So now let's chat about the fundamental question that is the elephant in the room. That is, how do we start, right? So initially, when people know about this concept and this practice, they do feel overwhelmed because there is so much of learning curve involved in this, right? So how do we get started? Like, what are the initial few steps anyone can take in order to just get started and then scale it later on if they feel like?
So speaking from my experience first, like I said, I was reviewing a blog post and that's when I stumbled upon chaos engineering as a concept, then stumbled upon bunch of tools, Litmus Chaos being one of them. And all I did was deploy that application to my local Minikube cluster and picked one of the ready-made experiments that they had and just played around with it. So I think if you want to implement resiliency, and especially use any of these tools, it's important that your engineers or anyone in the team has some experience while doing it. So most of these tools are like, for example, Litmus Chaos is open source, right? You can just download it, deploy it on your local cluster or wherever you're using it, right? It's super simple, runs a bunch of helm commands, the application is ready, they have experiments in place. Just try killing a pod that you have. So create a hello world pod, kill that pod. Create a hello world pod, add an ingress service, kill that ingress service. You will see 500 error on the browser, right? So you kill something, you see the response, and then you keep trying all the experiments that you have. So that way, you will have an understanding of how the tool works, what chaos engineering actually is, and what happens when you do what and how your application responds sort of. So like I started with a hello world example, and then I did a demo at one of the KCDs where I used Litmus Chaos to validate istios. So I had a virtual gateway, I had istio pods running. So what if I killed a istio pod, right? How will the traffic go? Will it go to my application or not? So these type of chaos failures I introduced using Litmus Chaos within the Istio namespace, and I was able to demo that. So I think the first thing is trying hands-on. So people, engineers in your team would not only know the concept of chaos engineering, but then also try out the tool. And then once they are confident, I think in terms of a phased approach, if anyone wants to take, the first thing, like I said earlier, was observability. So observability is the first thing that you need within your applications, because you need to be able to see things when some things break, right? So what happens when there is a latency in the network that you're using? What if the response comes in late, right? What is happening within your infrastructure? What's not working? So you need to have observable system in place first. So ensure that you have logging implemented correctly, you have metrics there, you have tracing there, you have auto instrumented your code if required, right? So you have proper visibility within your application, so that you know that if there is a latency here, this service is affected, and this is the function that is affected, and this is the way it is going to respond. So first, obviously, make your system observable, have an observability solution in place, have your logging metrics and tracing done correctly. Then you pick up one simple flow within your application, which is smaller to test, to pilot on, rather than going on something really important. You don't need to try to chaos your entire application right on the word go. So if your application is deployed, you don't need to go and start killing all the pods, start introducing failures, start having latencies and bunch of stuff like that. Don't look at the entire application. Start with one service, and it could be a very simple path, sort of, let's say a login path, right? So user just enters the credentials, clicks on login, it goes to the server, checks the credentials, and comes back. So this could be a very short but critical user flow that you can test here. So you'll have your service communication, you will have APIs in between, you have your different pods and different microservices that working. So you can focus on that. Now, once you have identified your path, what you can do next is, within the tool that you have chosen, there are by default some experiments that are available. So I spoke about downloading one of these tools, Litmus Chaos, for example, right? You have a bunch of experiments there, specific to cloud, specific to network, specific to storage. So pick one of those from it and apply to the critical user flow that you have chosen. And it could be something very simple to start with. So the most simplest chaos experiment can be killing a random pod. So within your user flow, when you have the login flow that you are working on, there might be multiple pods from the login service, the front end service, bunch of other things. Apply this experiment and choose one of the pods by, can select that by a namespace or by the attribute. Choose a pod, kill it, and then see what happens. Does your application start giving some random errors, right? Or does it work perfectly fine? So that could be your starting point. So you can use a pre-built experiment, the most simplest one, apply it and see how it happens. Then you can obviously add in more experiments depending on the kind of scenario that you expect would happen over here. So apart from randomly killing a pod, what important scenario that you can check would be the network. What if your server didn't respond in time, right? Or what if the input that came in from the server was not in a correct format, or bunch of things like this. The power went off, right? There was an outage and absolutely there was no response that came in. Or maybe the server that was dealing with the state, the PVCs, that pod completely went down or something went wrong with those clusters. So you can imagine the scenarios that can take place, and then accordingly either use the pre-built experiments, which I feel are very good for most use cases, or you can write your own experiment depending on if you have a specific scenario. So you do that, and once you are comfortable with that within the scenario that you have chosen, you can run this in a non-production setup. So run it on your dev machine, run it within your staging environments to gain more confidence. So you know that the resilience test that you have applied over here within your application, how does that perform? Run it a couple of times, run it at different staging, different environments before you actually go to production. And once you have all of these working fine and you have the confidence, you have the trust that your resilience experiments are working fine, your application is responding well, your infrastructure is working fine, then you can automate this entire part and make it part of your larger CI/CD pipelines or GitOps processes that you have. So once you have the basic experiment in place, automate it and then run it every time before a deployment goes into production, right? So you don't do it as a one-off exercise. Make sure that it becomes part of your regular deployment cycles. And I think that would be the most matured level according to me when it comes to implementing resiliency, right? So you start with on your local system to making it part of your CI/CD workflows, GitOps workflows, getting directly into production. So I think the key over here is, don't think that you are breaking things, you are breaking your application, but instead you should have a mindset where you are focusing on that. By doing all of this, you're just validating the assumptions that you have about the system on how it responds within certain scenarios. So you're just validating your assumptions. So that should be your mindset, and it should not be that I'm going ahead and just breaking bunch of things in my application.